Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Tyrone back with Tech Life. And here I have a great article for you guys from Eli Blumenthal over at CNET. I will leave a link to it in the description so you guys can check it out. So moving forward, the big question now is going to be, how good is T-Mobile's network really? That's going to be a question across the board because the brand is getting better. The assets are there for T-Mobile clearly, and we'll discuss that in this video. Probably will be a bit of a longer video, but they have the assets now to go and do this. Whatever that is, they can now go and do it. Whether that's closing the coverage gap in small market rural areas, being the best network in the top 100 markets, being a competitive threat to cable and fiber in the FWA space, being more competitive on the government side, being more competitive on the enterprise side. T-Mobile now 100% has the overall assets or tools in the toolbox, if you will, to go and do this. So we'll discuss that in this video. And of course, this article ties into the asset piece. So as we're looking at it from a nationwide scale, right, a lot of people are still to this day, from a perception perspective, are going to question, is T-Mobile really that good? Or how good is T-Mobile's network really? So let's look at that today, right? From a low band perspective, right? T-Mobile had like 0.1 megahertz of low band before all of this started. Before they got the Un-carrier movement, before all of the mid-band went on air, T-Mobile literally had 0.1% megahertz of low band. They had none. So now, arguably, debatably, T-Mobile has the best, most contiguous low-band holdings across the entire United States landmass. And that's with band 71, N71, 600 megahertz. They have it through every inch of the United States landmass. And with the recent purchase of Columbia Capital, and now just about 100% of the leasing of the 600 from Comcast has been completed, which T-Mobile will eventually buy. They got to have the most contiguous low-band holdings, the best low-band holdings across the U.S. Verizon and AT&T have low-band as well, of course, but theirs is very fragmented. They have some band 5 here, some band 12, some band 13. Verizon doesn't have band 5 in every inch of the country. They mostly have 10 by 10 when it comes to every inch of the country on band 13. And AT&T might have more low band overall versus T-Mobile. You know, they got 5, 12, 14, 29, but it's also like fragmented. It's not contiguous. You got to aggregate it. So T-Mobile arguably has the best low band holdings when it comes to a contiguous channel across the U.S. When the 600 auction first went live and T-Mobile bought the $8 billion that they got, they were able to get an average of 31 megahertz across the U.S. So at most, or in most parts of the country, they can at least do, and this was before they bought the other parts of 600, they could at least achieve 15 by 15 megahertz across the country once the rest of the 600 was moved off of LTE. They could at least, on average, get to 15 by 15. But now with the additional 600 from Columbia Capital and the other leasing that they're now getting from Comcast, they might be able to get to 20 by 20 in large parts of the country. And that's huge, in my opinion. That's a huge asset for them to, when it comes to coverage and the reachability and penetration. That's a huge band to have. It's just it's huge. And then it's not only good as it comes to the reach, it also carries capacity. At 20 by 20, you can carry more people further away from the cell site and still give them a very reasonable performance and experience on the network. So that's the first part. That's a huge part of the network and a huge asset to have. And like I said at the beginning, they now have all the assets to go and do that. So the next asset that's still a very solid asset is AWS and PCS. Those are their main bands of mid-band that they've been deploying throughout LTE. and now they're going to refarm that and move that over to 5G as well. And they gained some additional PCS from the Sprint merger. I mean, they're loaded with spectrum. AWS, Sprint did not own any AWS, so that's mostly, oh no, all of that is coming from T-Mobile. But the PCS piece is interesting because in a lot of markets, T-Mobile now has additional PCS from the Sprint merger that they can deploy, strictly for N25 5G purpose. They can leave a good chunk of that on LTE, whatever they choose to do. They can now do that, and it makes them flexible because they have so much of it. Like, for example, for SpaceX, they're using a 5x5 block, the G block, and they're giving that to SpaceX because they got so much of it. So they can do those types of deals on the back end because they got so much of that spectrum. So that's, again, an important asset to have, and they have it. They have all those assets. And then the next piece, which might be the most important piece from a business perspective, is the 2.5, because the 2.5 allows for the FWA and the mobility because it's such a large asset when it comes to bandwidth. And like this article is saying, T-Mobile's mid-band 5G network is getting another boost. So from the Auction 108 spectrum, that asset just got another boost in the white spaces, and for two reasons. In the white spaces now, you have additional bandwidth. Up to 140, 180, 190 megahertz have been spotted. And now, since it's cleared in those white spaces, you can now up the power and have further reach on the N41 as well. That hasn't been discussed recently. That's also now possible for the N41 to reach further from the tower in the white spaces since the Auction 108 has cleared. So that's a double win for T-Mobile across the board. Better bandwidth, more FWA customers, and now you can push the spectrum even further from the site. So that's another great asset, and that's T-Mobile's main workhorse as it comes to FWA and the mobility user from a speed perspective. Also, before all of this, T-Mobile still has C-band and DoD to use as well. That's another asset to the asset. I mean, they have so much of it that they can still deploy whenever they feel the need to. And right now, to be honest, I know there is a lot of people are curious as to, okay, how is T-Mobile going to deploy it? When are they going to deploy it? I mean, right now in a large part of the country, what's the need? T-Mobile's doing over 2 gigs on some of these N41 sites now. Why are they going to deploy C-band and DoD all of a sudden? Like Neville said, you got to go back to the history. You got to go back to some of the analyst days, to conferences. Neville Ray, before he left, said they would use it as congestion protection. Why are you going to spend capital dollars to deploy it on a cell site that's already doing well over 1 gig or over 2 gigs now? It makes no sense. It's not a smart investment to make. So you're going to wait. You're gonna allow this N41 to really mature. And I'm not saying that it's not mature now. It is mature. But you're going to wait and see till you have huge amounts of usage. You got all your FWA slots. If the site does go down in speed to like a danger level, I don't know what that would even be. I don't know if it's 500, if it's 100, I don't know. Then you go and deploy C-band and DoD. You wait for the more phones to have the combo capability, and then you go and deploy that. And then the tower is back up to speed. So it's not really a must right now. If you want to future-proof and just have the C-band and DoD panel just sitting up there, I mean, that's fine. But like I said, right now, no phone, or maybe like one phone, can take advantage of the combo. Like a iPhone 15 Pro Max right now wouldn't be able to aggregate all of this. It won't be able to do the C-band, the DoD, the N41s, the AWS, PCS low band. No, it wouldn't be able to do it. And even if it was deployed, I don't even think T-Mobile would push that combo because the N71, 25, and 241 channels is the better option here. The AWS gives, I mean, the PCS gives you more reach. The low band gives you more reach for calling. And then the N41 as well. Better penetration, better speed. So why would you take people off of 180 megahertz and put them down to 60? You guys get what I'm saying? Like, in most cases, T-Mobile has 40 megahertz of C-band and 20 megahertz of DoD. That's 60. So why are you going to take them off of a much wider, bigger channel and put them on 60 if you can't aggregate it? So that's, C-band and DoD, the way that I view it, and I'll talk about this more in future videos. I think that's a piece to the puzzle, like way in the future, like 2026. That's what I feel they're going to use that. They're going to wait. They're going to play this very smart. Of course, are there some sites that might need that today? Of course. There might be some areas that are just completely swamped and N41 is down. There might be some areas like mine and that are fragmented that can't even go above 100 megahertz where they implement this a lot sooner. But in markets where they got 190 megahertz of N41, 20 megahertz of N25, 20 megahertz of N71, I mean, they're doing over 200 megahertz of just bandwidth. What's the need to deploy C-band and DoD right away? So it's another piece of the toolbox that they can use in the future whenever there's a really a need for it. And then the last asset, right, is the millimeter wave. They have that too, and they have more of it than AT&T, so they can use that too. It's not a situation where they're just not going to use that. They're not using it right now because they're analyzing that they have to figure out a lot here. And I know the fiber discussion has been coming up in the last few days, but they have to figure out, okay, which third party are we going to use to hook these small cells up to the fiber, right? Who's going to be willing? Who's going to give us a fair price? That's all of that has to be looked at. You can deploy millimeter wave on some macros, but most of that deployment, and let's not kid ourselves, most of that deployment has to happen from a small cell C-RAN perspective, especially across neighborhoods. If they want to use that to offload, if they want to use that to do the FWA expansion, they will have to do it very smartly, and they will have to get all their ducks in a row. They will have to see, okay, what third party are we going to use? Where are we going to deploy this, in which neighborhoods? How do we view the neighborhoods that we need to deploy this in? Are we going to look at high demand, or are we just simply going to deploy this to grow more on the FWA side? So all of that has to be looked at. They got to do it very smartly. It has to be accretive. If the third party deal with a fiber provider to trench fiber for them to hook it up to the fiber is too much, they might hold off. Right? If it's not really accretive to T-Mobile and the business, they might not want to do it right now because it's too expensive. In the future, if they do go bigger on deploying their own fiber, that might be a totally different story. But the network right now, just I don't feel since it has so much mid-band today, I don't feel the need for them to all of a sudden deploy millimeter wave very heavy. They can do that in the future. All of those assets are in their possession. And there's just no rush, in my opinion. So how good is the T-Mobile network? Well, you just heard all of the assets that they have in their possession. They have the low band, they have the mid band, they have the high band, the millimeter wave. They have the cache assets to now deploy it very adequately. We've seen it. We see them deploying it. The scale of the network, that is likely the piece that they still have to work on, and that's just going to have to happen with time. There's nothing else you could do about it. But from a perception perspective, as they discussed, they see themselves right on par with AT&T from a perception perspective. They're looking, ahead of AT&T. They're looking at Verizon. They feel like they have surpassed AT&T in network performance, and I believe that to be the case because they've densified for many years longer than AT&T. They have the indoor solutions now coming in very quickly. Are there still some that are missing? Of course, but they're deploying them. And the mid-band piece, they have way more mid-band on air versus AT&T. So let me know your thoughts in the comments on this. Like, share, subscribe. If you are new, follow my social media outlets. This is Tyrone with Tech Life. See y'all in the next one. Peace.